in the sprawling mechanical depths of Nexus Station, where the galaxy's most feared predators come to refuel and repair their war machines, there exists an unspoken rule: never cross Vextar the Render. Standing 9 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws that can slice through titanium like paper, this alien wolf beast has built an empire of fear among the cosmos' most dangerous criminals. His battleship graveyard stretches across 3 systems, and his name is whispered in terror from the core worlds to the outer rim. But today, as sparks fly from a malfunctioning hyperdrive in Bay 94, Vextar is about to discover that the most dangerous predator in the galaxy isn't always the one with the biggest claws. Sometimes, it's the quiet human in oil-stained coveralls who's been watching, learning, and waiting for the perfect moment to remind the universe of a simple truth. Humans didn't claw their way to the top of the food chain by playing fair. What happens when unstoppable force meets immovable object? What occurs when a creature that has never known defeat encounters a species that refuses to accept it? In the cold vacuum of space, where mercy is a luxury and survival is an art form, one mechanic is about to teach the galaxy's apex predator the most important lesson of his life. Never underestimate a human with a toolbox and a grudge. The metallic corridors of Nexus Station hummed with the constant vibration of massive engines and life support systems. Built within a hollowed-out asteroid at the edge of the Kepler Nebula, the station served as a neutral ground for pirates, smugglers, mercenaries, and anyone else who operated outside the law. It was a place where questions weren't asked and credits spoke louder than words. Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his hands with a stained rag as he emerged from beneath the belly of a Zephyrian freighter. The ship's captain, a nervous insectoid creature with compound eyes, chittered anxiously as Marcus delivered his diagnosis. "Your primary coolant line is corroded beyond repair," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority that came from 15 years of working on every type of spacecraft imaginable. "I can patch it for now, but you'll need a complete overhaul within the next 100 light years, where your engine will cook itself." The Zephyrian's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of distress among his species. "How much for temporary fix?" 500 credits for the patch, 3,000 for the full repair. After a moment of deliberation, the captain agreed to the patch job. Marcus had seen this pattern countless times before. Spacers always chose the cheaper option, hoping to make it to the next port before their ship fell apart. Most of them succeeded, but the smart ones listened to his advice. As the Zephyrian shuffled away to gather his credits, Marcus heard the unmistakable sound that made every being on the station freeze in place: the heavy, deliberate footsteps of Vextar the Render. The creature that emerged from the main corridor was a nightmare given form. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, Vextar possessed the general build of a terrestrial wolf, but scaled up to impossible proportions. His fur was midnight black with silver streaks that seemed to shimmer under the station's harsh lighting. His muzzle was elongated and filled with teeth designed to tear through metal as easily as flesh. But it was his eyes that truly set him apart, burning amber orbs that held an intelligence far beyond that of any mere animal. Vextar wore minimal clothing, just a harness that held various weapons and tools of intimidation. His claws, each the length of a man's forearm, were both natural weapons and status symbols. Scars crisscrossed his muscular frame, each one telling a story of victory over some unfortunate opponent. The air around him seemed to crackle with barely contained violence. Every being in the docking bay found somewhere else to be as Vextar approached. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Vendors suddenly discovered urgent business elsewhere, and even the station's security personnel made themselves scarce. This was Vextar's domain, and everyone knew better than to interfere with his business. Marcus, however, continued working on the freighter's coolant system as if nothing had changed. He learned long ago that showing fear to predators only encouraged them. Besides, he had work to do, and the Zephyrian captain was depending on him to complete the repair. Vextar's massive form cast a shadow over Marcus's workspace. When a human didn't immediately stop what he was doing, the alien predator let out a low growl that reverberated through the deck plating. Human. Vextar's voice was like distant thunder, each word carefully enunciated despite his alien vocal cords. I require service. Marcus didn't look up from his work. I'll be with you in a few minutes. I'm in the middle of something. A collective intake of breath echoed through the bay. No one spoke to Vextar that way. No one kept him waiting. The alien's growl deepened, and his claws extended slightly, a warning that had preceded the deaths of dozens of beings across the galaxy. You misunderstand your position, mechanic, Vextar said, taking a step closer. When I speak, lesser beings listen. When I require service, it is provided immediately. Marcus finally looked up, his expression calm and professional. And you misunderstand mine. I'm not your employee, and I don't work for intimidation. If you want your ship fixed, you'll wait your turn like everyone else. If you don't like it, there are other mechanics on the station. The silence that followed was absolute. Even a normal background hum of the station seemed muted as every being within earshot held their breath. Vextar's amber eyes fixed on Marcus with the intensity of a hunting laser. For a moment, it seemed as though violence was inevitable. Then, something unexpected happened. Vextar licked. It wasn't a pleasant sound, more like the rumble of an earthquake mixed with the growl of a predator, but it was definitely laughter. The alien predator looked down at Marcus, as if seeing him for the first time. Interesting, Vextar mused. It has been centuries since anyone dared speak to me with such confidence. Very well, human. I will wait. But know this, my patience has limits, and those who test them rarely live to regret it. Marcus nodded and returned to his work. Noted, shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. As promised, Marcus completed the coolant patch in exactly 9 minutes and 30 seconds. The Zephyrian captain paid his fee and departed with nervous gratitude. Only then did Marcus turn his full attention to Vextar. Now then, Marcus said, wiping his hands clean again, what seems to be the problem with your ship? Vextar gestured toward the far end of the docking bay, where a vessel unlike any other sat in pristine isolation. The ship was clearly of Vextar's own design, a fusion of predatory aesthetics and cutting-edge technology. Its hull was shaped like a massive wolf's head, complete with glowing eyes that served as forward sensors and weapon arrays disguised as fangs. The ship's name, Apex Hunter, was etched in multiple languages across its flanks. My hyperdrive has developed an anomaly, Vextar explained as they approached the ship. It functions, but there's a vibration that should not be present. My ship must perform at peak efficiency. Anything less is unacceptable. Marcus walked around the vessel, taking in its impressive construction. The ship was a work of art as much as a weapon of war. Every line spoke of deadly purpose, and the technology integrated into its systems was clearly beyond anything he'd encountered before. This is beautiful work, Marcus admitted. Custom build. I designed and built much of it myself, Vextar said, a note of pride creeping into his voice. I'm not merely a predator, human. I am an artist, and this ship is my masterpiece. Marcus nodded appreciatively. I can see that. Mind if I take a look at the hyperdrive assembly? Vextar led him aboard through an airlock that dilated like an iris. The ship's interior was as impressive as its exterior, all flowing curves and predatory design elements. The bridge was dominated by a command chair that looked more like a throne, surrounded by holographic displays that showed every system status in real time. The hyperdrive chamber was located amidships, behind multiple security barriers that Vextar disengaged with a series of biometric scans. As the final door opened, Marcus let out a low whistle of appreciation. The hyperdrive core was unlike anything in standard galactic use. Instead of the typical crystalline matrix found in most ships, this drive used what appeared to be living biomechanical components. Organic tubes pulsed with energy, and the central core seemed to breathe as power flowed through it. "This is incredible," Marcus said, moving closer to examine the drive. "Where did you get biomechanical hyperdrive technology?" "I harvested it," Vextar said simply, "from the wreckage of a ship belonging to a species that no longer exists. They thought themselves superior to me. They were wrong." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but kept his professional demeanor. As he examined the drive more closely, he began to identify the source of the vibration Vextar had mentioned. One of the biomechanical interfaces wasn't properly synchronized with the ship's power grid, causing a harmonic frequency that would gradually damage other systems. "I see the problem," Marcus said. "Your biomechanical components are operating on a different frequency than your ship's standard systems. Over time, this will cause cascade failures throughout your entire network." Vextar's eyes narrowed. "Can you repair it?" Marcus studied the drive carefully, his mind racing through possible solutions. The biomechanical technology was beyond anything he'd worked with before, but the underlying principles were similar to other systems he'd encountered. "I can fix the synchronization issue," he said finally, "but I'll need to interface directly with the biomechanical components. That means temporarily shutting down your hyperdrive and making some modifications to your power grid." "How long?" Vextar demanded. 6 hours, maybe 8, depending on how well the biomechanical components respond to the modifications. Vextar was silent for a long moment, considering. His ship was more than just transportation. It was his home, his weapon, and his identity all rolled into one. Allowing anyone, especially a human, to make modifications to its core systems was not a decision he made lightly. "Very well," he said finally. "But understand this, mechanic. If you damage my ship in any way, your death will be neither quick nor pleasant. I will make an art form of your suffering." Marcus looked up from the hyperdrive core, meeting Vextar's amber gaze without flinching. "And understand this. I don't make threats because I don't need to. I'm the best mechanic on this station, possibly in this sector. Your ship will work better when I'm done than it did when you arrived." "That's not a threat, it's a guarantee." For the second time that day, Vextar found himself genuinely impressed by the human's confidence. Most beings cowered in his presence or tried to appease him with false bravado. This human simply stated facts with the calm certainty of someone who had never failed at his chosen profession. "We shall see," Vextar rumbled. "Begin your work." As Marcus gathered his tools and began the delicate process of interfacing with alien biomechanical technology, neither he nor Vextar realized they were being watched. Hidden in the shadows of the docking bay, figures in environmental suits observed every detail of their interaction. The Watchers had been waiting for this moment, when the galaxy's most feared predator would be vulnerable, his ship disabled for repairs. What they didn't know was that Marcus Chun had served aboard human military vessels before becoming a mechanic. His understanding of spacecraft went far beyond simple repairs, and his calm demeanor in the face of danger came from years of combat experience. He had noticed the Watchers the moment they'd arrived, and he was already making plans for what would inevitably come next. As he worked on the hyperdrive, Marcus couldn't help but smile slightly. Vextar might think he was untouchable, but he was about to learn that humans had survived and thrived in a hostile galaxy by being more dangerous than anyone expected. The alien wolf beast was powerful, certainly, but he had never faced a human who had something to prove. The real test was about to begin, and Marcus intended to show Vextar exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. The galaxy's apex predator was about to meet his match, and he didn't even know it yet. 3 hours into the repair work, Marcus had successfully isolated the frequency mismatch in the biomechanical hyperdrive. The organic components were more responsive than he'd expected, almost as if they recognized his intent and were cooperating with the modifications. As he worked, Vextar watched with the intensity of a predator studying potential prey, occasionally asking technical questions that revealed a sophisticated understanding of spacecraft engineering. "Your species fascinates me, human," Vextar said during a brief break in the work. Most beings either cower before me or attempt to challenge me through displays of aggression. You do neither. Marcus paused in his calibration of a bioneural interface. Fear and aggression are tools. Just like these, he said, indicating his equipment. Useful in the right situation, counterproductive in the wrong one. Right now, neither serves my purpose. And what is your purpose? To fix your ship and get paid, Marcus replied simply. Everything else is just noise. Vextar's laugh rumbled through the hyperdrive chamber. Practical. I appreciate that quality. It is rare among the prey species. Prey species? Marcus looked up from his work, one eyebrow raised. Interesting perspective. Tell me, how many humans have you actually fought? The question caught Vextar off guard. In truth, he had encountered humans only a handful of times, and those meetings had been brief. Most species throughout the galaxy viewed humans as relatively new to interstellar politics, technologically inferior to the established powers, and generally unremarkable except for their tendency to show up in unexpected places. Phew, Vextar admitted. Your species keeps to its own territory for the most part. Smart policy, Marcus said, returning to his work. Humans learned a long time ago that the galaxy is full of things that can kill you. We tend to be careful until we understand what we're dealing with. Before Vextar could respond, an alert chimed through the ship's communication system. The bridge displays showed multiple contacts approaching the docking bay. 6 ships moving in a coordinated attack formation. Unexpected visitors, Vextar growled, his predatory instincts immediately engaging. He moved toward the bridge with fluid grace, Marcus following close behind. The tactical display revealed 6 assault shuttles, unmarked but clearly military in design. They moved with the precision of professional soldiers, surrounding the apex hunter while staying just outside the station's weapons range. Vextar's enhanced senses picked up the electromagnetic signatures of boarding equipment and heavy weapons. Bounty hunters, he snarled, his claws extending fully. They believe my ship's disabled state makes me vulnerable. Marcus studied the tactical display with professional interest. The attack formation was textbook: isolate the target, cut off escape routes, then board and overwhelm. The shuttles were positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire, while their boarding teams prepared to breach the station's docking bay. How often does this happen? Marcus asked. Monthly, Vextar replied, checking his personal weapons. The bounty on my head grows larger each year, attracting increasingly desperate fools. They never learn. 6 ships is ambitious, though. They must have done their homework. Vextar paused in his weapon check. You seem remarkably calm for someone about to die, human. Who says I'm about to die? Marcus moved to the ship's secondary engineering console and began pulling up system diagnostics. Your hyperdrive isn't functional yet, but everything else works, right? Of course, but we are trapped in the docking bay. My ship cannot maneuver effectively in such confined spaces, and they know this. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since they'd met, Vextar felt a chill run down his spine. There was something predatory in that smile, something that spoke of hidden depths and carefully controlled violence. Vextar, how well do you know human military history? What relevance does that have to our current situation? Humor me. Ever heard of something called a force multiplier? Before Vextar could answer, the first boarding shuttle breached the docking bay's atmospheric barrier. The attackers moved with professional precision, a mix of species that included Krillian shock troopers, vegan commandos, and what appeared to be a pair of augmented humans leading the assault. The boarding team spread out through the bay, using scanning equipment to locate their targets while their combat engineers began setting up suppression fields to prevent escape. They moved like a well-oiled machine, clearly experienced in hunting dangerous prey. 24 hostiles, Vextar observed, studying their movements through the ship's external cameras. Professional equipment, military training. They intend to take me alive for the bounty. Alive is good, Marcus said, still working at the engineering console. Gives us more options. Us. Vextar turned to look at the human. This is not your fight, mechanic. You should surrender to them immediately. If they believe you are merely collateral, they may allow you to live. Marcus looked up from the console, and again Vextar saw that predatory smile. See, that's where you're wrong. The moment they decided to interrupt my work, they made it my fight. I take pride in my profession, and I don't appreciate being interrupted. As they watched, the boarding team began advancing on the Apex Hunters' docking clamps. They moved in textbook formation, covering each other while their heavy weapons specialists set up suppression positions. Everything about their approach spoke of careful planning and professional execution. What they hadn't planned for was Marcus. "Tell me about your ship's defensive systems," Marcus said, his hands flying over the engineering console. "I assume you have more than just the obvious weapons." Vextar's amber eyes gleamed with sudden understanding. "The hull can generate an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disable unshielded equipment within 50 meters. The docking clamps can be supercharged to create an electrical barrier around the ship. The atmospheric recycling system can be reversed to create a toxic cloud in the immediate area." "Perfect. What about the station's docking-based systems? Can you access them?" "I have unofficial access to most station functions," Vextar admitted. "The previous station administrator disagreed with some of my business practices. The current one is more accommodating." Marcus grinned. "Even better. Here's what we're going to do." Over the next several minutes, Marcus outlined a plan that made Vextar reconsider his assessment of human intelligence. The strategy was elegantly simple, yet devastatingly effective, using the attackers' own tactics against them while turning the confined space of the docking bay from a disadvantage into a killing field. "Your species has a talent for warfare," Vextar observed as they prepared to implement the plan. "We've had a lot of practice," Marcus replied grimly. "Humans spent thousands of years fighting each other before we ever left our home planet. We learned to be creative when the odds were against us." The first phase began when Vextar activated the ship's stealth systems, making the Apex Hunter nearly invisible to the attacker's sensors. At the same time, Marcus accessed the station's docking bay controls and began systematically shutting down non-essential systems while rerouting power to areas under their control. The boarding team noticed the changes immediately, but attributed them to defensive measures. They adapted their approach, moving more cautiously while their technical specialists worked to counter what they assumed were Vextar's standard defensive protocols. They had no idea that a human with 15 years of spacecraft engineering experience was turning the entire docking bay into a weapon. Phase 2, Marcus announced, activating a sequence he'd programmed into the station's atmospheric control system. The lights in the docking bay began to flicker in a seemingly random pattern. To the attackers, it appeared to be a sign of system failure or possibly an attempt at psychological warfare. In reality, Marcus was using the light patterns to map their exact positions while simultaneously releasing trace amounts of a maintenance compound into the atmosphere, a chemical that was harmless to most species, but would make their equipment more conductive to electrical discharge. Vextar watched the human work with growing admiration. The plan unfolded with mechanical precision, each element building on the last to create an increasingly dangerous situation for their attackers. "Your turn," Marcus said, transferring control of the ship's weapons systems to Vextar's command console. The alien predator needed no further encouragement. He activated the Apex Hunter's EMP system just as the boarding team reached optimal positions around the ship. The pulse was carefully calibrated, strong enough to disable their scanning equipment and communication gear, but not so powerful as to damage the station's life support systems. In the sudden darkness that followed, the attackers found themselves blind, deaf, and scattered across a space they no longer understood. Emergency lighting kicked in moments later, but by then, their careful formation had dissolved into confusion. That's when Marcus activated Phase 3. Using the station's cargo handling systems, he began moving containers and equipment throughout the bay, creating a constantly shifting maze that separated the attackers while providing cover for what was to come. The confused boarding team tried to regroup, but every time they thought they'd found a clear path, another obstacle would slide into place. "Now we hunt," Vextar growled, his predatory nature fully engaged. But Marcus held up a hand. Not yet. One more thing. He activated the final component of his plan, the docking bay's fire suppression system. But instead of using standard suppressant foam, he'd reconfigured the system to release a dense, harmless smoke that filled the bay with impenetrable fog. The effect was immediate and devastating. The attackers, already disoriented and separated, now found themselves operating in near-zero visibility while navigating an ever-changing obstacle course. Their professional advantage had been systematically stripped away, leaving them as helpless as prey animals in an unfamiliar environment. Now, Marcus said quietly, "Now we hunt." Vextar looked at the human with new respect. In less than 30 minutes, Marcus had transformed what should have been an impossible situation into a perfect hunting ground. The prey had become the predators, and the hunters were about to learn what it meant to face a truly dangerous opponent. As they prepared to leave the safety of the ship, Vextar realized that his understanding of humans had been fundamentally flawed. This wasn't a prey species at all. These were apex predators who had simply been smart enough to disguise their true nature until the moment it was needed. The galaxy's most feared hunter was about to go to war alongside a human mechanic. And, for the first time in his life, Vextar felt something he'd never experienced before, excitement at the prospect of having an equal partner in the hunt. The real battle was about to begin, and the outcome would reshape everything both species thought they knew about power, intelligence, and the art of survival in a hostile universe. The dense fog that filled the docking bay had transformed the familiar space into an alien landscape. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the smoke, creating a maze of moving shapes and uncertain depths. The 24-member assault team that had entered with such confidence now found themselves scattered and blind, their careful formations reduced to isolated individuals stumbling through an environment that seemed to shift around them. Marcus and Vextar moved through this chaos like wraiths, using the ship's external maintenance hatches to position themselves at strategic points around the bay. Marcus had studied the attackers' formation during their approach and identified their command structure, communication patterns, and likely tactical responses. Now it was time to dismantle them piece by piece. The two augmented humans are their leaders. Marcus whispered through the communication link he'd established using Vextar's ship systems. Take out their command structure first, and the rest will fall apart. Vextar's response was a low growl of acknowledgement. Through his enhanced senses, he could track each individual attacker despite the smoke and darkness. The scent of fear was beginning to overwhelm their initial confidence, and their movements were becoming increasingly erratic as they realized their tactical advantage had evaporated. The first target presented himself when one of the Krillian shock troopers became separated from his squad and wandered too close to a cargo container where Marcus had positioned himself. The alien warrior stood nearly 7 feet tall and was armed with enough firepower to level a small building, but in the fog-filled confusion of the docking bay, his size and weapons became disadvantages rather than assets. Marcus dropped from above, using a technique he'd learned during his military service. The Krillian never saw him coming. One moment, the alien was trying to navigate through the smoke. The next, he was unconscious on the deck with his weapons scattered around him. "First down," Marcus reported. Acknowledged, Vextar's voice carried a note of approval. "I have visual on the command team. They are attempting to regroup near the main airlock." Through the ship's sensor array, Marcus watched as Vextar stalked his prey through the artificial fog. The alien predator moved with supernatural grace, his massive form somehow managing to remain silent despite his size. When he struck, it was with the precision of a surgeon and the power of a natural disaster. The first augmented human leader never knew what hit him. One moment, he was trying to establish communication with his scattered forces. The next, he was flying through the air courtesy of Vextar's claws. The alien predator had been careful not to kill. The plan required at least some of the attackers to survive as witnesses, but the human would not be getting up anytime soon. The second leader, a woman with cybernetic enhancements that included enhanced reflexes and targeting systems, proved more challenging. She spotted Vextar's approach and opened fire with a plasma rifle that could have cut through starship armor. But the dense fog and constantly shifting obstacles provided perfect cover, and Vextar's enhanced agility allowed him to close the distance before her targeting systems could lock on. The battle that followed was brief, but spectacular. Enhanced human reflexes against predatory alien instincts, high-tech weaponry against natural weapons honed by evolution and experience. In the end, biology won over technology. The human leader found herself disarmed and pinned beneath claws that could have torn her apart, but instead held her immobilized. Command structure neutralized, Vextar reported with satisfaction. But Marcus was already moving on to Phase 2 of their counterattack. Using the station's internal communication system, he began broadcasting on the frequency the attacking force was using for their tactical coordination. "Attention, bounty hunters." His voice echoed through their comm units with eerie calm. "This is Marcus Chun, chief engineer of this facility. You are trespassing on neutral territory and interfering with authorized repair operations. You have 60 seconds to withdraw to your ships and leave the system, or you will be considered hostile combatants." The response was immediate and predictable, a mixture of laughter, curses, and threats from the scattered assault team. They still outnumbered their opponents 12-1 and had enough firepower to level the entire docking bay. What they didn't understand was that Marcus wasn't making a threat. He was providing intelligence. Every hostile response gave away the speaker's position and emotional state. The laughter told him who was still confident and potentially dangerous. The curses revealed who was frustrated and likely to make mistakes. The threats identified the leaders among the remaining forces and provided insight into their tactical thinking. 60 seconds are up, Marcus announced when the time expired. You had your chance to leave peacefully. What followed next would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy as a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Marcus and Vextar didn't just fight their attackers, they systematically dismantled them using a combination of technology, psychology, and predatory instincts that turned the docking bay into a hunting ground. Marcus used his control over the station's systems to create a constantly changing battlefield. Cargo containers moved on automated systems, creating temporary cover and blocking escape routes. Atmospheric controls shifted air pressure and temperature to disrupt enemy equipment, while providing advantages to defenders who understood the changes. Even the artificial gravity was adjusted in specific areas to throw off the attacker's aim and movement. Meanwhile, Vextar used the chaos to demonstrate why he was considered the galaxy's apex predator. He moved through the fog like a force of nature, appearing without warning to disable weapons, destroy equipment, and leave attackers unconscious but alive. His enhanced senses allowed him to track multiple targets simultaneously while avoiding their increasingly desperate attempts to coordinate their defense. But it was the combination of human tactical thinking and alien predatory instincts that proved truly devastating. Marcus would use the station's systems to herd targets into specific areas where Vextar could engage them most effectively. Vextar would eliminate threats in ways that created psychological pressure on the remaining attackers, while providing Marcus with tactical intelligence about their capabilities and responses. Within 30 minutes, the 24-member assault team had been reduced to 6 terrified individuals huddled together near their entry point, desperately trying to reach their extraction shuttles. Their equipment was destroyed, their leaders were unconscious, and their carefully planned operation had become a nightmare of smoke, shadows, and predators that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Please," one of the remaining vegan commandos called out through the fog. "We surrender. We'll leave immediately." Marcus and Vextar emerged from the smoke like ghosts materializing from the ether. The alien predator's amber eyes glowed with satisfaction, while the human mechanic looked as calm and professional as he had when working on the hyperdrive. "Smart choice," Marcus said, his voice carrying no trace of the violence that had just unfolded. "You have 5 minutes to collect your unconscious friends and get back to your ships. If I detect any of you in this system after that, there won't be any more warnings." The surviving attackers needed no further encouragement. They grabbed their fallen comrades and fled toward their shuttles with the desperate haste of prey animals escaping a predator's territory. Within minutes, the docking bay was empty except for Marcus, Vextar, and the slowly dissipating fog. As the emergency ventilation system began clearing the air, Vextar looked at the human with something approaching reverence. In his centuries of existence, he had never encountered another being who could think and fight with such deadly efficiency. "Your species continues to surprise me," Vextar said as they watched the last of the attack shuttles flee into space. "That was artistic," Marcus shrugged, already turning his attention back to more practical matters. "They made it easy by underestimating their opposition. Classic mistake in any kind of conflict. You speak as one with military experience." "Former human naval intelligence," Marcus admitted. "I specialized in unconventional warfare before I became a mechanic. Turns out the skills transfer pretty well." Vextar processed this information with the calculating mind of a predator. Human naval intelligence was legendary throughout the galaxy for its effectiveness in impossible situations. They were the ones who had somehow convinced 3 separate alien empires to destroy each other while humanity quietly claimed the worlds they left behind. They were strategists who could turn any disadvantage into an advantage and any defeat into a victory. "Why did you not mention this earlier?" Vextar asked. "You didn't ask," Marcus replied simply. "Besides, I'm a mechanic now. The past is just experience that helped me do my job better." As they made their way back to the Apex Hunter, Vextar found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about humans. They weren't prey species at all. They were apex predators who had learned to hide their true nature until it was needed. More than that, they were strategic thinkers who could adapt and improvise in ways that even his enhanced intellect found impressive. "The hyperdrive repairs can be completed now," Marcus said as they entered the ship. "Should take another couple of hours to finish the synchronization process." But Vextar was no longer thinking about ship repairs. He was thinking about the implications of what he had just witnessed. If one human mechanic with basic tools could turn a hopeless situation into a decisive victory, what could an entire civilization of such beings accomplish when properly motivated? For the first time in his existence, Vextar began to understand why the older, more established galactic powers spoke of humanity with such careful respect. They weren't afraid of human technology or military might. They were afraid of human creativity, adaptability, and the quiet competence that could turn any situation to their advantage. As Marcus returned to his work on the biomechanical hyperdrive, Vextar settled into his command chair and began reviewing the tactical recordings of their recent battle. Each detail revealed new layers of planning and execution that impressed him further. The human had turned a simple repair job into a masterclass in strategic thinking, and he had done it all while maintaining the calm professionalism of a skilled tradesman. The galaxy's most feared predator had just learned that there were things in the universe more dangerous than claws and fangs. There was intelligence, creativity, and the quiet confidence of a species that had never met a problem they couldn't solve. And somewhere in the depths of space, word was already spreading about what had happened at Nexus Station. The story would grow in the telling, as such stories always did, but the core truth would remain. Vextar the Render, the galaxy's apex predator, had found his equal in a human mechanic with a toolbox and a grudge. The universe would never be quite the same. 2 hours later, the Apex Hunter's hyperdrive hummed with perfect harmonic resonance. Marcus had not only eliminated the troublesome vibration, but had actually improved the drive's overall efficiency by 7%. The biomechanical components now synchronized flawlessly with the ship's power grid, creating integration so smooth it seemed as though the organic and artificial elements had been designed specifically for each other. Remarkable, Vextar said as he reviewed the system diagnostics. The drive operates more efficiently now than when it was first installed. How did you achieve this level of optimization? Marcus wiped his hands clean and packed his tools with the methodical precision of a craftsman who took pride in his work. The biomechanical components were fighting against your ship's power frequency instead of working with it. I adjusted both systems to find a natural harmony between organic and artificial processes. Think of it as teaching them to dance together instead of fighting for control. The alien predator studied the readouts with growing amazement. The modifications Marcus had made went far beyond simple repair work. They represented a fundamental improvement in the ship's design that should have taken weeks of analysis to achieve. Your understanding of biomechanical technology is impressive for someone who claims to be merely a mechanic, Vextar observed. I've worked on a lot of different systems over the years, Marcus replied diplomatically. You pick things up. What he didn't mention was that human naval intelligence had made studying alien technology a priority during his service years. He had personally analyzed captured ships from over a dozen species, learning their strengths and weaknesses for potential military applications. Biomechanical systems were particularly interesting because they represented a fusion of living and artificial components that human technology hadn't yet achieved. Vextar activated the ship's startup sequence, and both beings felt the subtle shift as the Apex Hunter systems came online. The ship's biomechanical heart began beating with steady, powerful rhythm that spoke of perfect health and deadly capability. Outstanding work, Vextar said with genuine appreciation. I have never encountered anyone who could improve upon my ship's design. What do I owe you for this service? Marcus considered the question carefully. In truth, the work had been fascinating from a technical perspective, and the combat situation had provided more excitement than he'd experienced in years. But there was something else, a recognition that this job represented more than just a business transaction. Standard rate for the repair work is 5,000 credits, he said finally. But I think we both know this situation went beyond standard parameters. Vextar's amber eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. Indeed it did. Name your price for the additional services. No additional charge, Marcus said, surprising the alien predator. Professional courtesy between apex predators. The words hung in the air between them, carrying implications that went far beyond simple business arrangements. By acknowledging their shared status as predators, Marcus had elevated their relationship from client and service provider to something approaching mutual respect between equals. Vextar was silent for a long moment, processing the human statement and its implications. In all his centuries of existence, no other being had ever spoken to him as an equal. Most saw only the terrifying predator, a force of nature to be feared or appeased. But Marcus had seen past the surface to recognize the intelligence and strategic thinking that made Vextar truly dangerous. Interesting perspective, Vextar said finally. Most beings consider themselves either predators or prey. Few understand that the distinction is more complex than simple biology would suggest. Humans learned a long time ago that the biggest predator isn't always the one with the biggest teeth, Marcus replied. Sometimes it's the one who's smart enough to turn any situation to their advantage. As if to emphasize his point, the docking bay's communication system activated with an incoming message from station administration. The voice belonged to Administrator Clicks, a Corellian bureaucrat who managed Nexus Station's day-to-day operations. Mr. Chun, we've received reports of an incident in Docking Bay 94. Are you and your client unharmed? Marcus activated the reply system. Everything's fine, Administrator. Just some visitors who decided not to stay for dinner. The bay will need cleaning, but there's no structural damage. Understood. Station security reviewed the sensor logs and has classified the incident as justified defense of neutral territory. No further action will be taken. The message ended, but its implications were clear. Nexus Station's management had declared the defeat of the bounty hunters to be legitimate self-defense, effectively giving official sanction to everything that had occurred. More than that, word of the incident would spread through the criminal underworld within hours, carrying with it a clear message about the consequences of underestimating either Vextar or his human mechanic. "It appears your reputation is about to change," Vextar observed with satisfaction. "By tomorrow, every bounty hunter in the sector will know that Marcus Chun is not to be trifled with." Marcus shrugged, but Vextar caught the slight smile that crossed his features. "Might be good for business. Nothing like a solid reputation to cut down on unwanted interruptions." "Indeed, though I suspect you will find that reputation to be both a blessing and a curse. Fame tends to attract challenges from those who wish to prove themselves against established predators." "I'll deal with that when it happens," Marcus said pragmatically. "For now, I have work to finish." But Vextar wasn't quite ready to let the human return to his routine. The events of the day had fundamentally altered his understanding of both humans and his own place in the galactic hierarchy. For centuries, he had operated as a solitary predator, relying on his own strength and cunning to survive and dominate. The idea of partnership, true partnership between equals, was entirely new to him. "Marcus Chun," he said formally, "I have a proposition for you." The human looked up from his tool storage, eyebrow raised in curiosity. "I travel extensively throughout the galaxy," Vextar continued. "My ship requires regular maintenance, often in locations where competent service is difficult to find. Would you be willing to provide ongoing technical support in exchange for expanded opportunities?" The offer was carefully phrased, but its implications were clear. Vextar was proposing a partnership that would take Marcus far beyond the confines of Nexus Station. It was an invitation to join the galaxy's apex predator in whatever adventures and conflicts the future might hold. Marcus considered the proposition with the same careful analysis he applied to complex technical problems. Working with Vextar would certainly be lucrative and exciting, but it would also mean leaving behind the relatively safe existence he'd built as a station mechanic. On the other hand, the events of the day had reminded him how much he missed the challenges and excitement of his former life. "What kind of expanded opportunities are we talking about?" he asked. Vextar's expression took on the calculating look of a predator planning a hunt. "There are certain individuals throughout the galaxy who consider themselves untouchable. Crime lords who hide behind armies of subordinates, corrupt officials who believe their positions make them invulnerable, and predators who have grown lazy through unchallenged dominance. And you're planning to remind them that nobody is truly untouchable." "Precisely. But such work requires more than raw strength and intimidation. It requires intelligence, technical expertise, and the ability to adapt to unexpected challenges. Today proved that you possess all of these qualities in abundance." Marcus found himself intrigued despite his natural caution. The proposal offered everything he'd been missing since leaving naval intelligence: complex challenges, meaningful work, and the chance to use his skills against opponents who deserved whatever happened to them. "Partnership implies equal status," he said carefully. "I'm not interested in being anyone's subordinate, no matter how impressive their reputation. Nor would I accept a subordinate as a partner," Vextar replied. "What I am offering is an alliance between equals, your intelligence and technical expertise combined with my strength and reputation. Together, we would be more formidable than either could be alone." The logic was sound, and Marcus had to admit the prospect was tempting. But there was one more consideration that needed to be addressed. "What about afterward?" he asked. "Assuming we're successful in whatever we undertake, what happens to the partnership when the work is done?" Vextar considered the question with the same careful thought he applied to all strategic decisions. The galaxy is vast, and there will always be those who believe themselves beyond the reach of consequences. I suspect we would find no shortage of meaningful work. But if you ever choose to return to this life, he gestured around the maintenance bay, I would respect that decision. Marcus nodded slowly. The offer was fair, the terms were reasonable, and the work would certainly be more interesting than routine maintenance jobs. More than that, he recognized something in Vextar that he had rarely encountered: genuine respect for his abilities and intelligence. One condition, Marcus said finally: "We do this right. No unnecessary casualties, no collateral damage, and we make sure we're always on the right side of whatever passes for justice in civilized space." "Agreed," Vextar said immediately. "I have no interest in becoming a simple killer or terrorist. The targets I have in mind deserve whatever fate befalls them, and the galaxy would be better served by their removal." Marcus extended his hand in the traditional human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Vextar reached out with one massive claw-tipped finger and carefully grasped the human's hand. The contrast between human flesh and alien talon should have been intimidating, but instead it felt like the beginning of something significant. "Partners," Marcus said simply. "Partners," Vextar agreed. As they sealed their agreement, neither being fully understood how profoundly their partnership would impact the galaxy. Word of their alliance would spread through the criminal underworld like wildfire, carrying with it the promise that the old rules no longer applied. Crime bosses who had felt secure behind armies of thugs would suddenly find themselves vulnerable to attacks that combined predatory cunning with human ingenuity. Corrupt officials who had believed their positions made them untouchable would discover that no amount of bureaucratic protection could stand against opponents who understood both the letter and spirit of justice. But more than that, their partnership would become a symbol of what was possible when different species worked together as equals. Humans and aliens had cooperated before, but usually in relationships defined by dominance and subordination. What Marcus and Vextar offered was something new, a true alliance between apex predators who recognized and respected each other's unique strengths. As the apex hunter prepared to depart Nexus Station, Marcus took one last look around the maintenance bay that had been his home for the past several years. It had been a good life, but he was ready for something more challenging. "Any regrets?" Vextar asked as they settled into the ship's dual-command configuration Marcus had helped design. "None," Marcus replied, his hands already familiarizing themselves with the ship's control systems. "I was getting bored with routine maintenance anyway." "Excellent." Vextar's laugh rumbled through the bridge as the ship's engines came online. "Because I have received intelligence about a syndicate operation in the Kepler system that I believe would benefit from our particular brand of attention." As the apex hunter slipped away from Nexus Station and jumped to hyperspace, the legend of the partnership between the galaxy's most feared predator and the human mechanic who had proven himself an equal began to spread. It would grow in the telling, as such legends always did, but the core truth would remain unchanged. In a galaxy full of predators and prey, two apex hunters had found each other and discovered that together they were capable of redefining the very nature of power itself. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, those who considered themselves untouchable were about to learn that everyone has something to fear when the hunters decide to work together. The universe would never be quite the same, and that was exactly what both partners intended.